Okay, here I am. Yeah. Can you hear me and see me now? Sorry,
Hi.
confusion. I don't know what I did.
Hi, Nair. Okay. Just give
Oh,
us a second. It's okay. Just
okay.
give us a second just to give some information here to our participants. Thank you for joining
Okay.
us.
Yeah, I'm ready to go.
Okay, everyone, as we don't have much time, so welcome back again to our second part of this first day of our Young Learners and Very Young Learners online conference to celebrate the 20 years of APINEP. Hooray! I hope you enjoyed your lunch. For those of you who are coming for the first time and joining us for the first time, let me just give you some housekeeping notes very quickly. So remember that every time you enter a session, either a webinar or a workshop, you need to type in your name. But if we don't say anything to you, it means that your name is visible, okay? If you face any technical problems, either leave the room and come back again, or say something on the chat box, and one of us, either me or Daniela, the co-host, will try to help you. This is a webinar, will take us 45 minutes plus 15 minutes for questions and answers. And I think I'm going to present our plenarist, our speaker. And NAYR IBRAHIM is a well-known already, I think, teacher trainer and speaker in Portugal and for the Portuguese English teachers. She has been an API speaker for quite a long time already, yeah, and we've learned a lot with her. At this moment, NAYR, at this real moment, she is in Norway, okay? So she's working as a professor at the Nord University in Bodo, and she has worked before and for a long period of time at the British Council in Paris. NAYR has also a last publication is the book Teaching Children How to Learn, which I strongly recommend. And as you may remember, Vanessa has shown the book too. She made a reference to it. And before I say something about this session, let me just say that NAYR is the person that speaks more language, the person that I know that speaks more languages. She speaks at least 4 or 5 different languages, including Portuguese, okay? I suppose that is why her research areas of interest include B and multilingualism, language and identity, just to mention a few. So, and today she's going to share with us some ideas to create a language-friendly learning space as a key to children's holistic development by exploring the potential of visual and intercultural methods. So thank you, NAYR, again for accepting our invitation. And the screen is all yours now.
Okay, thank you. So let me just share. Okay, not yet. Let's see if I can share now. And here it is, and my presentation is over there. There we go. Right, so, and yeah, okay. Can you all see now, and can you hear me? Yep, great. Okay, it's weird because this is a webinar, so I'm not really getting the interaction, but great. So I am so pleased to be here. And I want to thank API again for inviting me. And I also want to say, bit of age, happy, because I started, I think the first time I came over was in 2015, and it was in Lisbon, a conference in Lisbon, and it's always been such a wonderful conference, a wonderful get-together of old friends and new friends, and I've got some photos here of friends that I hadn't seen for ages, and it was Appy that brought us together. So Tony and Lucy, whom I'd worked with in Porto when I was still working in Portugal, and Terry at the top, whom I hadn't seen since she left South Africa, so it must have been about 30 years. So Appy and the new friends, you know, at the bottom with Sandy. And so Appy's been this wonderful place where we learn, but we also learn together. And I've really enjoyed that journey. And that journey has been about language. And today I'm going to talk about languages and how we can perhaps turn our English classes into language-friendly classes, especially in the world today. However, I mean, I always start with contextualizing what I do and why I'm doing what I do, because we have had a process of monolingualizing education, language education, and even the way that we function. And I think I've got just some examples of that here. We know that in the 20th century, a lot of, there's a big focus on just using the one language, the one important language that belonged to that particular context. And you've got some examples of very interesting posters and comments, like, for example, the one on the left, aux élèves des écoles, this is in France. The first point, il est défendu de parler Corse et de cracher par terre. So it is forbidden to speak Corsican and spit on the floor. So Corsican and spitting on the floor or come together, you know, put them on the same level. So, and then at the bottom, you've got this young girl being humiliated. This is in Wales, where if you spoke Welsh in schools, you'd have this like wooden plaque put around your neck, and the plaque said Welsh not, and then you weren't only humiliated, at the end of the day you were also punished. So, and that may be like in the 20th century, but unfortunately the 21st century that continues, and you have some examples of that with a newspaper headline, children punished for speaking Portuguese in kindergarten. That was in 2014. And the example at the top with the German writing happened actually this year in April, where a teacher punished these two children, I think they were about 9 years old, for speaking for speaking their language, Turkish, in a German school. And the punishment, so it wasn't the Welsh not, and it wasn't physical punishment, but they had to write lines, they had to answer the question, why do we speak German in schools? So, and the other one, the one that's quite humorous, I like a little panda. I know this is a teacher trying to find strategies to encourage her children, the children in her class to speak English, and she says every time Portuguese is spoken in this class, a baby panda dies. Okay, we understand what she's trying to do, but what if we actually just allow the language into the classroom and actually use those languages to help us learn English? So my question is, how can we do this? And that's what I'm going to do here today. I think we need to start with the starting point, which is English, the English language. And the English language is both a world language that has accompanied and been implicated in the process of globalization. And globalization, you know, with all its positives and negatives. And in that process, the English language has actually become very diverse itself. It has influenced lots of people. It has influenced other languages, because so many other words, we have so many words of English in our own languages today, but it has also been influenced by these languages. It takes in so many words and expressions from the rest of the world. So it has been called the hybrid or the mongrel language. And it's also been called the promiscuous language, which was quite interesting. And here are some comments about how that, so the relationship with that world language, the power of that world language is quite contradictory and quite fraught to a certain extent. There's a tension where some of these quotes that I found online are actually quite interesting, where language where English has come out of its roots. It doesn't really belong in America or in the UK anymore. It belongs to the world. And as Salman Rushdie said, English no longer an English language now grows from many roots. I do like the top one though, where English doesn't borrow from other languages. English follows languages down dark alleyways, knocks them over, and goes to their pockets for loose grammar. So this is actually the metaphor of English as an attacker, of English as a killer, as of other languages and cultures. However, it's not that complex. It's not that simple. It's not that straightforward. Because if you look at the quote at the top from Chinua Achebe, who is a Nigerian writer, he writes in English, and he has this contradictory relationship with English, where English is the language of the colonizer, but at the same time, it's a language that he has made African, and that African English is the English that he's able to communicate in, and it's the English that he's able to describe his world to. So, and my world was very much South Africa, because I was born in South Africa, and English in Africa has a very specific flavor. And I write about this in a blog I wrote a while ago. And as I was researching this, this PowerPoint, I actually found my little paragraph. And this is how I describe it. So like my parents, English came to Africa on a boat. Yes, my parents came to Africa on a boat, and the boat was called O Império. It took a month to get to Africa. English was spewed out on a stormy night onto the shores of the southernmost tip of Africa, traveled the land, mingled, settled, and grew roots. It evolved among unfamiliar hues and sunny skies, transformed as it struggled to describe the rich fertility of the coastland and the desolate dryness of the interior, burned in the African sun, grew hardy, and became African. So English has this power to actually become part of the context where it lands and where it has grown roots. But this power also comes with responsibility, and the responsibility of the English language classroom is that of opening up that language space to the cultures of the world, to the cultures that already are included in the English language, that the English language carries with it, but also the cultures of the world that the English language can open a door to. So for us English teachers, that is a wonderful opportunity. It's not just a responsibility, it's an opportunity for us to bring in so many different activities and worldviews and cultures into our English language classroom. So this allows us then to create the language-friendly classroom. Now, we have already had quite a lot of discussion, and we know there's been a lot of research in integrating interculturality and intercultural competence in the English language classroom. We may all remember Byram's work, and I am very happily working with Sandy and Sonia actually on the project iSpell that actually Sandy mentioned this morning, where we are looking at intercultural citizenship education through English picture books. But intercultural education, I believe, needs to include the language that these people speak, the languages of the different cultures, as well as the cultures. So what I'm actually looking for is creating language-friendly classrooms that are inclusive of languages and cultures, a factor in children's well-being, because the languages that perhaps they have, that they speak at home and bring to the classroom, are also being recognized and celebrated and validated. It's a socially just classroom where children's language learning rights are taken into account, and a contextual classroom where we take into consideration the personal, the family, the educational, and the social context of the children that we have in our classrooms. So, so what I'm trying to do is to bring together the multilingual and the multicultural, because language is a crucial cultural element, and making children aware of its value and significance is important. So the intercultural lens allows us to look at language through different cultures. The multilingual lens gives us different sounds, different pronunciations, different words to actually talk about those cultures and to better understand those cultures. So what I'm looking for is, how do we teach English multilingually and interculturally? And what I've done a lot with is use visual methods. So the multimodality comes into it. So that's the how. And the how is interesting because there's this focus on the visual, which is which Kalaya and Pierre Conan-Huchter, I always have to slow down when I say that name, have been working on. They're calling it the visual turn, where we're looking at how visuals and artifacts and objects and linguistic landscapes. So looking at a creative, arts-based approach to dealing with the linguistic diversity in our classrooms. And on the side, you've got some examples of that. And I do like the picture on the top, which is the picture of one of my students in one of my research, actually does my PhD, and she actually writes the word, the phrase "I love you" in her 5 languages and different scripts as well. You can see Bangla and Korean there. And then she says, "My languages are my confidence, my proudness, my achievement. It is my difference from the others. It is my power." So it's not just English that's her power. It's the fact that she's got all these languages that's her power. And I just love the way she's actually holding the world in her hand. So what I'm going to do is then look at the different activities, different ways of integrating the multilingual, the multicultural, and the visual, so the multimodal, within this framework. And this is a framework that I sort of been working on, where we're looking at, it's called the 8 Ds framework, because it consists of 8 words that start with a D. They come in couplets, and they focus on an aspect of how we can render our classrooms more language friendly and more multilingual. So it's divulge and disseminate, discover and develop, deconstruct and de-dichotomize, and decolonize and duplicate. Let's have a look at examples. So first and foremost, we have the divulge and disseminate, and that is the first step. It's about playing with language. It's about bringing out those languages. It's about encouraging the students in our classroom to open up about the languages they know, the languages they speak at home, or even the languages that they would like to know one day in the future. So it's making multilingualism visible in the schools, in the classrooms, and not just of the children, but the parents, get the parents involved. What about the staff in the classroom? There must be staff in schools that also speak different languages, so making them visible. And on the side, you've got a picture of exactly the kind of activity that I did with my students, where I asked them, okay, write hello and I love languages in as many languages as you know, and you've got them all there. You can actually identify some of these languages. So this is first of all just a very simple activity about bringing languages out, and the discussion you can have around this kind of activity is wonderful, because you can get everybody to actually say the language. We can talk about how the languages are spoken. You can look for how similarities between the languages. Which languages can I read? Can I work out just by looking at them, because I know this language? So I can work out some of the Nordic languages because I am now working in Norway, for example. So that's just an activity. Another one is a language portrait. Now, the language portraits have been used to well, you basically ask an individual to draw the languages on this silhouette. And so this is actually my language portrait. And I drew you can see flags. I drew flags. Flags come up quite a lot when you ask individuals to talk about their languages, because they've become representative of a particular national space, but also of a particular language. Even though it doesn't quite work like this, we all know that English does not belong in one country. However, in this particular case, I've got 3 of my main languages, which is Portuguese, English, and French. And for English, I drew covering my whole body with it also, and that's one comment that was made about this my particular language portrait, is that I drew my languages and the flags completely outside of the line, so I'm not coloring inside the lines. And I think that's another lesson that we can teach our students about language and multilingualism. You don't color inside the lines. Languages do not sit inside borders. They cross borders all the time. So this activity is also brilliant in order to allow children to see how, first of all, language functions in their lives, but also what it means for them, how important these languages are for them. And I've got this example here, which I'm going to share with you because it was this I did with a group of 14-year-olds in France. And at first I thought that they were not going to be interested in this. Imagine 14-year-olds drawing their languages on a silhouette. Well, they absolutely loved it. And this one I thought was just the best, simply because of how metaphorical the images she uses to describe her languages. She first talks about the brain, so French. I put French where my brain is. Indeed, it is the first language I have learned, and I use it every day to think, to write, and to speak. So language, French is her functioning language. It's the learning language. It's the language of reflection. Then she's got, I put English at the place of my heart because it is my emotional and imaginative language. Baroque and Arabic is, in my other hand, the one that makes us feel safe and peaceful, just like my mom, who comes from Morocco. So the hand, the mother, that affection between the child and the mother. I wrote Hebrew near my tummy, so basically her gut, because I'm Jewish, so Hebrew is deep inside of me. I put German in my hand because for me, hands represent orders, and I was indeed forced to study German at school. I love this one. So order, you have to learn German. The Arabic is part of my heritage because of my grandparents from Saudi Arabia. That's why, just like the tree that has roots, I wrote Arabic at the place of my feet. So once again, this metaphorical perspective on her languages is absolutely wonderful. I think Italian is one of the most beautiful languages in the world. I go to Italy every summer since I was 5. That's why I put Italian in the place of my mouth. And I think you can actually imagine her using her mouth and thoroughly enjoying the sounds of Italian. And last but not least, I wrote Chinese on my shoulder as a metaphor. She actually used the word metaphor to say I have left it behind. So she doesn't speak Chinese anymore. So I think the potential of this activity, not just to allow the classroom to see, okay, look at all these wonderful people with all their amazing languages. This is who we are. This is the identity of a classroom. But it also allows the individual to express their identity, and then to use the English language to express this identity. So there's a lot of work that a teacher could do to give the children the language, the words that they need in order to describe their languages. Language maps are another possible activity. And in this particular case, I've got this one as an example because this teacher was actually a teacher. She was asking about her French. She asked me if, should I put French on my language map? And I thought, well, I don't know, it's up to you. And she says, well, I only know a couple of words in French. So, well, what do you think? So she says, yeah, I'm going to put French on my language map. So now her language map includes even the languages that you only know a couple of words for. So I think these language maps have the potential is to show you how multilingualism isn't something that is where you have to have full proficiency in all your languages. It can just be a language you only have a couple of words in, but the language is there, it's in your brain, it's had an effect. And I just love her translanguaging, don't you? Ich hablo un peu de Deutsch and English, aber mein language número uno es el noruego. So there we go. So the next step is discover and develop. So once we've actually done the activities where we're actually bringing out the languages, making them visible, bringing them out into the world, we then need to look at activities where we can discover and develop our understanding of multilingualism. Because first, multilingualism is a very complex concept and phenomenon. It's very multidimensional. It includes all of these elements. So you're talking about a language, we function between the linguistic, the sociolinguistic, the political, the affective, the socio-cognitive. That's what multilingualism is. And multilingualism is also about a quantitative aspect of how many languages do you speak, or how many languages do you know? 1, 2, 3, 4. So those separate counting of languages. But what we do always forget is that multilingualism is also translingual practice where languages get mixed, where we use both languages. You saw that language map where that teacher actually used about 4 different languages to explain how many languages she actually knew. But the interesting thing about translanguaging or code switching or translingual practice is that it's actually, there are rules that govern the way we mix languages. So when you read a text in multiple languages, it makes absolute sense because the words fit into a grammar that makes sense to our brains. And that is something we can use in the classroom as well to help our children identify different language patterns. This is another example of language maps, because this was a teacher who went back into school, teacher I'd worked with, and she went back into school. She drew her own language map, that's the one on the right, and then she had her children draw, the children that she was teaching, their own language maps. The one on the left is an example. And what I love is, okay, you can actually see how the child has sort of mirrored the teacher's language map in terms of the flow of the map, but you can also see what multilingualism is, what language is. It's all about people, it's about places, it's about things, it's about objects, it's about experiences, and it's also about the future. And you can see the child's map to be continued. So this child plans on learning more languages. So multilingualism is a journey. It's a journey that lasts a whole lifetime. Therefore, it should be a journey that we also include in our teaching and in our English classes. And it's a journey that can also become concrete. And these are examples of what I've been calling the dominant language constellations or language repertoire artifacts. And what I did was ask individuals to go away and to create something that represented their languages, to actually use paper, whatever they wanted, to create their languages. And these are the DLCs of these individuals, and they're absolutely amazing. I'll just tell you what they are. The one on the left is an atom, and this individual put Norwegian in the middle because Norwegian is their home language. The other one on the right is a dream catcher. I just love the dream catcher because at the bottom, the feathers are the languages that this individual wants to learn in the future. So it's not just the languages of today, but the languages of the future. An ice cream cone with all the languages. And I just love how we all know what happens to ice cream, don't we? It all melts. So you can just imagine all these wonderful languages melting into each other and becoming one. And then I love the hearts and the colors, the shapes are all very symbolic and very metaphorical. And in this particular case, this individual says that blue is her favorite color. Therefore, she put Norwegian, which she considers to be her mother tongue, in blue. So this is something that you go away and you create. So using your hand, it's arts and crafts. So it's very creative way of talking about language. But the discover and develop is all about understanding how translingual practice works, as well as just, talking about language and understanding what multilingualism is. It's complex, that it's a journey, that it's spatial, that it's temporal, that it's artifactual. It's also language. And this is an activity that I did with a group as well. This was actually this year with a group of teachers. This is me trying to ensure that these teachers experience plurilingual practice on a regular basis, so that they see that their language classrooms can include other languages, but in a very subtle and well-integrated manner. So what I did is I used Meg and Marg. I'm sure you all know Meg and Marg. It's a wonderful story with Meg and her cat. And we were using this book. I was using this book to work on lesson planning. Okay, so we planned a lesson around Meg and Marg. And then in the following lesson, I decided, okay, how do I review the work that I did? So I thought, let me show them how you can do reviewing through multiple languages. So I asked them to think about the words that they would have picked out of this book to teach children. So, you've got witch, cauldron, moon, broom, cat, hat, the whole thing, all this language around Halloween, obviously. And we decided to look at these languages and I asked them to find the languages you can see the languages on the board on the right, so in Spanish, in French, and I just happened to have, because Norwegian, obviously, I didn't put Norwegian in there because they could spell the Norwegian words better than I could, but I have a student in there that's who is Latvian, And so we thought, okay, so she's going to tell us what the Latvian words are for all these elements in the story. And it's wonderful. So we had this amazing lesson where the student actually was practicing her techniques of introducing vocabulary, the vocabulary of Megan Mark in Latvian. So introducing the language, listening, repeating, giving us group drill, whole class drills, group drills, individual drills. And then, so I wrote the words on the board. And now here we have she wrote the words on the board. And here we have the language. And we learned 3 things. I learned 11 things. I counted 11 things about the Latvian language. First of all, that it's a transparent language. So the way you write it is the way you say it, much easier than English. Well, I learned 9 words, and I can tell you that katis, you can see katis, which that's a cat, very close to the word that we know of cat. The others I'll let you guess, or you can look them up. I learned that words like menes and sikparnis, can you see how we emphasize the syllable with the accent? So I know about 11 things, about Latvian in my life, simply because this student came up and we had this translingual practice, and the students loved it. The students found this really interesting because they kept saying how they can see connections, how they keep looking for connections between the languages they know, their own language, and English. So here's just an example of translingual practice. Another example of translingual practice that I also introduced this year is called a Tangled translation. And we did this in connection with the work that we've been doing on Journey to Joburg. Now, Journey to Joburg is a lovely story about apartheid South Africa, where it's about these 2 children who have to travel to Johannesburg during apartheid to find their mother because their baby sister's ill. And in this journey, this journey becomes symbolic of a discovery of the terrible impact that apartheid and the laws of apartheid had on the individual, on these children, and these children don't know it. So it's a wonderful story to use with your children, it doesn't, you discover apartheid at the same time as these 2 children discover apartheid. Because I don't think people talk about apartheid, we know they were terrible, but how much do you really know about what went on? How much do you really know about the individual cost, or the cost of apartheid to individual lives? And this is a wonderful story. So that journey, so the reader is taken along with the 2 children, Naledi and Tyro, in this journey of discovery. So I decided that the next lesson we were going to review the story, and we were going to write a summary of the story. And I decided the summary of the story was going to be in a Tangled translation format. And as you can see, that I used English and German. So what I asked the students to do was to untangle the English from the German. Now, I used German because I know that some of the students had learned German as a foreign language, and I know that German and Norwegian, that's where I'm based in Norway, German and Norwegian are very close languages. They're both Germanic languages. So even if our students hadn't learned German, they could probably identify some of the words. And if you read this translation, sorry, I'm going to go back. This is not the translation of Journey to Joburg. It's a translation of another book that I'm reading with Journey to Joburg. We later worked on the translation of Journey to Joburg, which I'll show you in a minute. But if you read this translation, you'll see how the English and the German actually fit in quite nicely together. So a young Mädchen called Lila will einen Fireworkmaker wird, like her Vater Lachland. Despite ihre Talente, glaubt Lachland, this is an unsuitable job für Mädchen ist. So you can see how the languages are actually really quite expertly linked together. So the students then went away and they undid the language. I then asked them to create a summary of Journey to Joburg for me to untangle. So I became the student. I had to untangle English from Norwegian, and that was a wonderful learning experience for me because I'm trying to learn Norwegian. It really made me look at the language and all the different elements of the language. And when I asked the students about this experience, what was it like? And I also gave them another activity, which was a gap fill, and I had them compare doing a Tangled activity, doing a Tangled translation and a gap fill. And it was interesting what they said, because they said, when you do a gap fill, you're only looking for the meaning. But when you do a Tangled translation, you have to look at the language and how the language works in order to then work out the sentence in the two languages. So wouldn't this be an interesting activity instead of a gap fill, which leaves a gap? You can fill that gap with another language and bring in a discussion around language learning, around language comparisons, and language similarities. Yes, we have now come to picture books, because picture books are another fantastic, or children's literature, another fantastic way of introducing and working with language and culture, or languages and interculturality. These two, I'm sharing these two infographics because I think it's so important for us to remember that what we're doing as English language teachers is also redressing the balance where injustice is concerned, where our focus on whiteness is concerned, where we forget to bring in the experiences of other peoples, of people of color, of people from different contexts, of indigenous peoples. And these two graphics, or these infographics, actually are quite telling. If you look at 2015, the first one that was done is in 2015. It was actually done in the States, and they were looking at the representation in children's literature of minorities, or minorities. I hate that word, but it's, you know, people of color and of other cultures. And you can see there, well, you can see the numbers. 0.9% of African Americans were represented, 7.6% were African, but 73% white, and 12% animals. So in 2018, we did the same. They did the same test or study. And interestingly enough, you know, we have a slight increase. So from 0.9% to 1% of American Indians. Isn't that amazing? And then, okay, 7.6% to 10% of African Americans, but look at the from 12% to 27%. So what have we done? Instead of actually drawing and bringing in peoples from different cultures, we just went ahead and started drawing more animals. And that's how we solve the problem. So what can we do as English language teachers to solve that problem? Well, as Sandy Morale mentioned this morning, yes, of course, I was going to bring in the mirrors, the windows, and the sliding glass doors from Rudy Sims Bishop. And I think it's really important that our English language classrooms become mirrors of the society that we live in today, which is so socially and linguistically and culturally diverse. But they should also become windows into a world, so mirrors and windows. Our classrooms should become windows into another world, into other worlds that exist, and that perhaps in our classes we don't really have access. We can't travel to Antarctica. We're not going to travel up to Lapland and discover the Sami. But how can we bring the Sami culture and the Sami languages and the Sami yoiking, for example, into our English language classrooms? Well, maybe through picture books. So, and then these windows, these picture books also help us. They become sliding glass doors, because through the pictures, through the images and the language that actually interplay, that help, that tell sometimes the same story, sometimes different stories. It helps you look at the story from different perspectives. This allows you to actually become part of that world. And I would just like to look at some of these wonderful picture books that I have started working with. And one of them that I've just written about, actually, if you know of the Clearly Journal, I've just written about Marisol McDonald Doesn't Match and Marisol McDonald No Combina, looking at multilingual picture books in the EFL classroom. And what this allowed us to look at is this book is a wonderful example of what a multilingual individual is, how a multilingual child lives, and how her life is full of contradictions, and it's a mix and matching of worlds, of different colors, of different traditions. She's a redhead because her father's Scottish American, but she's got dark skin because her mother is Peruvian, and then everything about her is a mix. So she loves green polka dots and purple stripes. She speaks Spanish, English, and sometimes both. She has brown skin, but the hair color of fire. She loves putting peanut butter. She loves peanut butter and jelly burritos. She writes her name in both cursive and print. She plays soccer playing pirates, not just soccer or pirates. She brings the two together, and the whole book is about how she actually brings all these contradictions in her life together. So it's a wonderful book to use to explain to children what multilinguals live like, and how a multilingual life is not a very straightforward one culture, monocultural life. It is a wonderful mix of all their experiences. And I particularly like this example of an activity that I found as I was researching my article, which is called The Pieces of You. So basically the children are asked to draw all the different aspects of who they think they are and how they see themselves in this puzzle. And then you bring the puzzle together, and that is you. That whole wonderful kaleidoscopic mix, that's you. And you can do that in the classroom with your children as well. Yes, we use a lot of picture books, and one of the examples of that I've used is, well, just some examples: Grandpa Christmas, Koala, the Koala Who Could, the Koala Who Could. But the activity I want to show you is that we looked at these picture books, and we looked at, okay, what can you do with this picture book? How can you exploit this picture book in the classroom? And so this was actually with teachers, and the teachers were looking at all the different themes and cross-curricular themes. So there's so much you can do with the picture book. But what I particularly liked about this was that the teachers brought in language. So if you look at the top of the koala, the spider web, right, of the koala, the mind map of the Koala Who Could, Norwegian, introduce the Norwegian names of the animals. So the teachers are looking at ways of integrating the children's own language. And on the other side, Grandpa Christmas, so the teachers also include norsk, so their own language as a subject. Write a letter to the grandchildren about what kind of world you want for them in Norwegian. So the teachers here are already looking at a translanguaging approach to teaching English, which I thought was absolutely wonderful. So we've got the potential of picture books, or the intercultural picture book, multilingual English lesson, supported by multilingual picture books, becomes a trampoline for critical discussions about cultural and linguistic diversity, and makes languages visible, welcome, and a factor in children's well-being. But we're not stopping there, because we still have deconstruct and de-dichotomize. One of the other Ds, which is looking at the English classroom through a multiplicity of stories, and not just through a multiplicity of languages, and not just through one language. And looking at, so I don't know if you know Shivanandi Ngozi Adichie and her TED talk on the dangers of a single story. And that's what we need to avoid, is the danger of a single story. But that danger of a single story also needs to start with language. And we need to be careful how we use language. And there's a lot of dichotomization of language. We talk about monolingual versus multilingual. And yet it should all be together, because we switch between monolingual and multilingual mode whenever we need to. I'm in monolingual mode at the moment, speaking English because I'm supposed to. This is API, this is about it's about English language teaching. But if I want, eu durante falar bocadinho em português, because I can also speak Portuguese, but not just yet, maybe later. So we need to actually look at how we use language to classify and to talk about our children. I've got native and non-native speaker there, which I absolutely hate. We should actually stop using those words. They are so undermining, and they are subjugating. There's always one that's subjugated to the other. So, and I like native and non-native, as if the native speaker is a better teacher than the non-native. We know that is not true. So we need to de-dichotomize language teaching. And last but not least, decolonize and duplicate. And I'm looking at this from a perspective of the whole idea of decolonizing the curriculum. So I'm thinking of, okay, how do we de-monolingualize our monolingual curriculum? So we need to go, and this also allows us to bring our English language classes into other worlds, and into worlds that we actually very often don't even consider. We forget. we forget about the fact that, you know, there's loads of people who speak English all over the world, and they also bring things into the perspectives that are important. And here you've got two very different perspectives. And Chinua Achebe from Nigeria, who uses English in his writing, he's a Nigerian writer, and he calls it subversive English, because through English he can talk about who he is and his culture. Yet Ngugi wa Thiong'o from Kenya decided he's rejecting English. He wrote some fantastic books in English, and now he started writing in his own language, Gikuyu, because that gives him an opportunity to get to his own people, because he feels, why should I write in a language that my own people can't read? So two different perspectives, both correct. Yet how can we give voice then to indigenous cultures or to other cultures? And this is a project that I'm going to be working on in January. And this came up because in Norway, we actually have, they have a very strong focus on supporting indigenous cultures. And one of these indigenous cultures is Sami. And we are supposed to, according to the national curriculum, we are supposed to be integrating Sami into all the different subjects. So how do I integrate Sami into English? So what we are going to be doing is looking at a bilingual Sami Norwegian picture book, which is talking about, I'm sure you can guess if you look at it, plasten, plastika, plastic, havet, in the sea. So with an environmental message. So I'm really looking forward to start working on this. So what my students are going to do is they're going to look at this book, and they're going to identify important words and structures that they can translate into English, and through English actually work around the theme of cleaning the oceans and how our oceans are becoming so plastic heavy. And already you can see some of the transparent words that have come up already from the book, like plastic, plasten in Norwegian, plastika in, excuse my accent, I don't think there are any Sami speakers here in this conference, but I'm not quite sure I'm saying it correctly, but I'm doing what I can. See, Harvard, Arbid, can you see Harvard and Arbid quite similar? Whale, val in Norwegian, and fala, I think, in Sami. So I'm going to obviously need my Sami colleague to help me out here with this. But what a wonderful opportunity. Other opportunities. And I'd like to introduce the idea of transknowledging, which Kathleen Hugh, who is actually a fellow South African who also does work on translanguaging and multilingualism, came up with. And I think through picture books, it's such an opportunity to transknowledge. And transknowledging is an exchange of knowledge. It's like translanguaging is an exchange of languages. Transknowledging is an exchange of knowledge where we learn about each other and we learn about the other. And you've got some 3 books that allow us not just through the language, but also allow us to get into the culture. The Polar Bear book is actually, once again, a translingual, a bilingual Norwegian and Sami book, so northern Sami. And in this book, Little Bear gets lost. And he can't remember his name, but he remembers one thing, the song that his mother sung to him. And that's because traditionally in Greenland, children often get a small song that is sung for them as an extra name, just as the Sami children get a yoik. I would highly recommend you look up this word, yoik. It's also spelled with a J. And yoiking is a traditional Sami song, and it's wonderfully emotional and evocative. So do look it up. Then you've got the We All Count, and this is a counting book in English and Cree Ojibwe in Canada. But it's not just about the language, it's also about the art, and the animals are actually drawn using traditional Ojibwe art, which is beautiful. And then the book on the left is actually about the intergenerational impact of residential schools on Canadian First Nations people. But this book also exists in bilingual format, and I absolutely love the language. This is Cree language, and I thought it's wonderful to see how these traditional languages we never hear about are actually written. So why not bring this into the classroom? And then I found this at the university as well, which I absolutely loved, the linguistic landscape of Sami. So we've got 3 different posters, one in Norwegian about the Sami Barnehage, which is the Sami preschools, Sami, the indigenous people of Norway in English, and then a glossary, a pictorial glossary of Sami clothes in Sami on the right. So I thought, oh, I'm definitely going to use this when I start doing my session on integrating Sami into the English language classroom. And just before we finish, and I'm a little bit over time already, but very quickly, I just want to introduce a text ensemble, which I think is a wonderful opportunity for us to look at literature, languages, and culture from very different perspectives. And the text ensemble is bringing in different texts to shine different perspectives and therefore to enhance critical discussions around a particular text, but also to bring in more deep learning. And I'm just going to use Journey to Joburg again. And in Journey to Joburg, I've actually brought in a lot of these different texts because Journey to Joburg, what we don't realize is it's written by a white author. So when I did this first, way back in Paris, I can't remember how long ago it was, and I did it with a group of children in our bilingual section in Paris. They were all white, and the children read the story. Now, as their children didn't bother to read the prologue at the end, and the prologue at the end actually was written by the author. The author is white. So when I asked them, so tell me, who wrote this book? Do you think it was a white person or a black person? They all said black person, assuming that only a black person could write that experience. And yet the author was white. A white person brought up very, very much in a white context, like I was in South Africa. But, you know, so once again, looking at different perspectives, and also, in bringing the important it's important for children to know that color is not the issue. It's how we treat people that's the issue. And then we looked at the history of the story of Mandela through both a picture book and a non-fiction book. Songs and poetry, I don't know if you remember Give Me Hope, Joanna, that song was banned in South Africa, and but we were all singing it. Because I'm Black, a poem by Ndlovu, an African writer that we completely ignored, us, the white South Africa. Linking A Journey to Joburg and Apartheid to the civil rights movement in America, for example, through the book We Traveled the Waters. Looking at a film about skin color in America, in South Africa. And then obviously the history of apartheid. And I've just got that sign on the slide where it's a multilingual sign. How wonderful, in English, Afrikaans, and Zulu, but it's basically about telling the black people that they're not allowed to enjoy the beach. That was South Africa. So here you've got loads of different activities. So a text ensemble approach to literature is a wonderful way of actually looking at a text. So in developing a language-friendly classroom, we need to look at how we can develop language-friendly classrooms. We can do that by making children's languages and plurilingual skills visible, by including discussion around children's languages, cultures, and language use, by acknowledging children's language repertoires as a positive contribution to language learning, by developing children's awareness of languages and cultures in their classroom, by sustaining and validating children's multilingual identities, by exploring connections, differences, similarities, roots, families, by transknowledging to open a window to otherness, and by supporting the teaching of multilingual strategies such as language modes, translanguaging, metalinguistic, pragmatic awareness, and learning to learn to be plurilingual. So hopefully the point is that we want to change our mindsets and become a lot more inclusive of languages and cultures. And that's where I end. So thank you very much. Shall I stop sharing my screen? There is a poll. Stop sharing. That I forgot to give at the beginning, but I wonder if we can do it now, Sonia, the end poll.
You wanted to, okay.
Is it possible? Or if it's too much bother, then we don't have time.
No. I can try to do it. I was just going to say that, so you want the end of the session poll?
Yeah, the post session. Perhaps some of the participants could just fill in the poll quickly and then we could share it. But I don't know if you have any questions because I haven't actually been able to
the poll, you mean the Padlet, right, NAYR?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, just a second. I will share it with you. It was a fantastic session. It was very enlightening, and about language, multilingualism, multiculturality, and different perspectives of looking at languages. So a lot.
Yes.
A lot. I think I need time to reflect, but because there are some concepts also that you mentioned that I need to explore, for example, the transknowledging. It's something that's for sure I need to explore and reflect on. And at the same time, I really like the activities that you shared, the translingual practice activity and the Tangled translation. And for the Tangled translation, I would ask you, do you think this, what are the students, how do they feel when they have to do that kind of activity, the Tangled translation? Do they find it difficult or challenging?
I think it depends on the level. So the Tangled translation that you saw there, I was doing that with adults. So these are my first year teachers, and they were actually quite capable of doing that amount of language. If I was doing it with children, I've seen smaller texts. Now, it's not that it's difficult. They never mentioned that it's difficult. What they did mention is how much they enjoyed looking. It's like a puzzle. They said it's like a puzzle. It's like working out the secret code, and you have to sort of try and untangle it. So it's a lot more fun, actually.
Okay.
A word that they use, and also it makes them think about language more. It makes them think about how language works. So which preposition goes here? Okay, what is the verb here? Is the verb the past tense or the or the present tense? It makes them think about language more. So I think this needs to be introduced slowly, and you know, in also even in terms of the text length. You know, we have to be small when you actually start the whole idea. But if you also integrate it naturally into your lessons, like I did here, I didn't tell them, oh, we're doing plurilingual practice. No, I told them, okay, we're going to do a review of the activity that we did last week, or so we're going to look at the summary of the book that you read, but we're doing it in a Tangled translation. Okay, untangle the languages. And they worked in groups, and they did. So it just became part of the lesson. It wasn't something completely different and out there, you see.
It's really interesting. And I really enjoyed the infographic of diversity of children books, the comparison between 2015 and 2018. Really amazing. I don't know if anyone has more questions, but I already add here on the chat box the Padlet, and I'm asking you just to answer questions 3 and 4, because and I'm going to share the Padlet now, just to see what people are answering.
Yes. Well, okay. Wow. Look at all that. Yeah. Thank you for sharing your ideas and your feelings about the session. I think it's always great to see how you feel about all this, because it's sometimes teachers feel that, oh gosh, we don't have time for any of this. But when it's integrated into the learning, teaching cycle, just naturally, it just becomes part of the lesson. And both the teacher and the students become more used to working in this manner.
Yeah. So lots of things are coming. Well,
yes, playing. Okay, how do you create? By playing, by imagination. Lovely. So inclusive, language, cultural awareness. Yes, difference, friendly. Yes, diverse. I will try, yes, to send.
Let me see if I can.
Integration, inclusion, absolutely.
There's lots of
loads of ideas. I mean, I don't actually have direct access, so I can only see a part of the.
I'm trying to.
Yeah, but I can see there's loads of wonderful words there. Diverse, respect, lovely, absolutely. I think sometimes we forget that we need to, that by acknowledging children's language, we're actually respecting who they are, and you know, and their background. And I think sometimes we forget.
So how will this session change your practice in creating English language friendly classes? By inviting children to try linguistic and cultural identity and diversity. It will validate what I personally always believed. Which
brilliant. Yes.
There are a lot of thank yous in the chat box, Nair.
Yes, I've seen that. Well, I want to thank you all for coming to my session, obviously, and for all the lovely things that you've all been saying. Yes, thank you. You're absolutely welcome. And it's just wonderful to be here. I don't know if there are any particular questions, but I see there are lots of comments, and I think the comments are
There's
great.
one question. Should our
Yes.
recognition of the English language as a lingua franca should still worry us about linguistic imperialism?
Well, yes, it should. And I think not in a negative sense, but it should prompt us to do something about that. And that's what I'm trying to do. I don't look at at English within, as an imperialist language like Robertson, Robert Phillipson, who is very anti to a certain extent, but then he's also calling for us to have to look at English more realistically, and I think we can do something about that. I don't think we can escape English. I think that it's just not realistic. But what we can do is use the English language to actually open up the doors to other cultures, and the English language is a wonderful place for that. The English language classroom is a wonderful place for that, and it allows that to happen quite nicely and quite comfortably, because English itself is so diverse. And there's
The person who actually asked replied, and he said it was him and his wife that I had in mind.
Ah, yes, absolutely. They are, yeah. I mean, you've got they've done some very good work, and I think the work that both of them have done, so Tuvas Kangas and Robert Phillipson, is important work, because they've shone a light on something very early on that, we were just quite happily going on English, and, everybody knows English, everybody loves English, but we need to have a more critical approach to the English language. And as English language teachers, it is our responsibility. But as I said, it's also an opportunity.
Thank you.
And it was a great opportunity to hear you, to listen to you, and with all these ideas, I think I will review again the recorded session.
Okay, great, yes.
Thank you so much, Nair,
okay,
on behalf
welcome,
of
and thank you
Api
all,
and Apinep.
Beijinhos, as we
Hope to have with us briefly, maybe in a few months.
hopefully, yes.
Yes, fingers crossed. Thank you so much, Nair.
Okay,
Enjoy
lovely.
the rest
Thank
of
you
the
all.
weekend.
you.
Bye-bye. Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Danielle.
Bye.